5 wrestling botches that could have ended in disaster.
He's going to eliminate both of them, Samir and Sunil.
Normally, I'm coming to you speaking about different types of wrestling injuries. In this video, however, I'm going to do something different. Today, I'm going to talk to you about 5 wrestling botches that could have ended badly.
What'd you say?
What I mean to say is that they should have ended in injury, but somehow, miraculously, they did not. Whether you call these wrestling botches, wrestling fails, or just plain wrestling mistakes, these are some of the narrowest misses in all of BOTCHAMANIA. Stay tuned to see my discussion of 5 amazing near misses from professional and indie wrestling during this video. Hey everybody, Dr. Chris, orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician. Welcome to my channel, your #1 stop for information on orthopedic injuries and sports medicine that's easy to understand for everybody. And I do mean everybody, including Tekashi 69. That being said, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get on with the topic of the day. Stick around to the end to see if you can guess my top wrestling botch near miss. Juan Banos was a Mexican masked professional wrestler who fought under the name Lizmark. He was a multiple-time champion and held both singles and tag team championships in both the EMLL, CMLL, and AAA wrestling organizations. In a match that occurred on the 31st of October 2006, Lizmark was wrestling against fellow Mexican wrestler El Terrible. During the match, Terrible, let's just say terrible, attempted to perform a finishing move known as the Styles Clash on Lizmark. Now, if any of you are familiar with this move, then you know that this move is iffy even in the best of circumstances. If you want to know more about the Styles Clash and its potential for injury, then let me know in the comments section and I'll be sure to discuss this in another video. This move basically involves a prone body slam performed on an opponent held in an inverted cross position with the opponent's arms captured by the legs of the wrestler who is performing the move. As with many wrestling moves, this move is a high-risk maneuver that requires both cooperation and coordination between both of the wrestlers involved. Most importantly, it requires the wrestler upon which the move is being performed to lift his head and extend his neck at the time that the move is being pulled off, in order to avoid having his head trapped underneath the bodies of both wrestlers as they fall to the ground. If the bottom wrestler fails to do this, then the wrestler's head can be trapped underneath the bodies of both of the falling wrestlers, thereby forcing the bottom wrestler's neck into extreme, and I do mean extreme, cervical flexion. Here, it seems that Lizmark did not get the memo about extending his neck during the maneuver, because this did not happen. To make matters worse, Terrible, did not seem to notice that Lizmark was not appropriately positioned before conducting this finishing move. Terrible pulled off the move with Lizmark's neck positioned in cervical flexion. And remember, I said that that's a no-no. Both wrestlers fell to the canvas, landing on Lizmark's head, forcing it into even further cervical flexion. It is questionable whether there was also a degree of lateral bending that occurred here as well. After this move was completed, it initially appeared as though the worst possible thing had happened. The combined weight of 2 large men forcing Lizmark's neck into extreme cervical flexion would be expected to cause extensive trauma to Lizmark's neck. In particular, this type of positioning could be expected to cause a fracture or a fracture dislocation of the bottom wrestler's cervical spine. In addition, an injury to the spinal cord might also be expected. If the injury occurred above the level of the C3 through C5 vertebrae, then there might also be the possibility of sudden death as the injury knocked out control of the diaphragm and his breathing mechanism. Remarkably, despite Lizmark's best impression of children's toy Stretch Armstrong, Lizmark was not significantly injured. He did not die, nor did he suffer a fracture or dislocation of his cervical spine. Likewise, he did not suffer a cervical disc herniation as a result of the pronounced cervical flexion. And this just means a lot of freaking cervical flexion, like a lot. In fact, it appears that he suffered only a mild injury to his neck, as he was able to return to wrestling after only a short break to recuperate. In this situation, Lismark, who would die several years later from different causes, was extremely lucky, as this botched styles clash could have ended very, very differently. Lismark, may he rest in peace. By the way, if you want to know more about my life as an orthopedic surgeon, be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Stable Knees. I'm also on TikTok at Dr.Chris Raynor. On to the next. Marcus Everett is a young aspiring wrestler from Toledo, Ohio, who wrestles on the indie circuit. At the time of this next incident, Marcus had been working in the industry for a few years. On August 21st of 2017, Marcus attempted to perform a high-flying stunt while working for the IWA Mid-South promotion in Memphis, Indiana. Leading up to this match, Marcus had been involved in a feud with another wrestler named Cole Radrick. On this particular date, this match was to be the end of the Everett-Radrick feud and was also the last show on that particular card. Marcus wanted to finish the event with a bang. Bang. Marcus and Radrick were wrestling in a loser leaves town TLC, or tables, ladders, and chairs match. Like, obviously, come on. Marcus had planned a big finish for this match, like a big finish. His opponent Radrick tried unsuccessfully to talk him out of his planned finish. In fact, Marcus had not even cleared the high-flying finish with the wrestling promoter Ian Rotten beforehand. During the match, Marcus hit Radrick with a ladder and knocked him onto a table. He quickly began to climb up the wall of the building between the first and second girder in order to perform this spot. Just prior to jumping, he looked down and realized that the table where Radrick was lying was a little bit further out than perhaps it should have been. Consequently, Marcus realized that he would not be able to simply lean forward to fall onto the table, but rather that he would have to jump with a little momentum. Just a little. Unfortunately, with his adrenaline flowing during the match, Marcus put a little more heat on it than he otherwise should have. Just a little more heat. And he completely missed the table. Yep, completely. He landed directly onto the concrete floor without any padding. Did I mention that it was on the concrete floor from a height of approximately 10 to 12 feet? Generally speaking, falls from a height are a problem. They are typically associated with fractures of the extremities, the spine, and the skull. They are also associated with internal organ injuries and closed or open head injuries as well. And this just means fractures to the skull that can be either closed or open, or in other words, compound. Usually, the higher the height, the more severe the injuries, and the increased the likelihood of death. For more information on injuries suffered after a fall from height, be sure to check out my video on the extreme yoga girl who fell from the 6th floor of her apartment building and survived. In this particular situation, given the manner in which Marcus fell to the ground, he could be expected to have suffered any one or more of a number of injuries. The list of potential injuries includes fractures of his right arm either above or below the level of the elbow, fractures of his ribs, his clavicle, or his scapula, in other words, his shoulder blade, fractures of his pelvis, particularly on the right-hand side, which struck the concrete floor, fractures of his right leg at the level of the femur or at the level of the lower extremity, and potentially including either the tibia, the fibula, or both. Fractures of his spine at the cervical, thoracic, and lumbosacral levels. Fractures of his skull or injury to his internal organs, including his brain. Fortunately for Marcus, he landed mostly in the transverse position, with his feet striking the ground first. This body position allowed him to actually bleed off some of the speed of his impact before his trunk hit the concrete full force. Also fortunate was the fact that he did not strike his head on the concrete. While Marcus's adrenaline levels caused him to miss the mark, they also allowed him to not feel the pain associated with his collision with the freaking concrete. Although the referee wanted to stop the match, Marcus determined that he was not incapacitated and he decided to proceed with the remainder of the match. The match continued to its completion, where Everett ended up taking a pile driver off the top rope onto a table. The same table that Marcus managed to miss when jumping off of the girder. And the table did not break like it was supposed to. I guess the table got the last laugh there. Fortunately, despite the height from which he fell, Marcus was not injured and he lived to wrestle another day. I want to teach everybody about orthopedics and sports medicine. Help me to educate everyone by sharing this video with anyone who you think will be interested in this topic, except for Reddit. Whatever you do, do not share this video to Reddit. Don't do it. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video to see if I've selected your comment as one of my favorite comments from the last video. Now, moving on. Harvinder Sira is one half of the Canadian professional wrestling tag team known as the Singh brothers. Cue Singh intro music here. Harvinder fights with his brother Gurvinder under the ring name Samir Singh. Together, they are former WWE 24/7 champions, with Samir having 5 reigns and Sunil having 4. Over the years, the brothers, who have been part of many storylines, have been involved with a number of close calls. In this first of 2 incidents that I'm going to talk about, the brothers were involved with the Battleground pay-per-view event on July 23rd of 2017. During this event, the brothers interfered in Jinder Mahal's Punjabi prison match against Randy Orton for the WWE Championship. During the match, Samir found himself hanging off the outside of the cage at a significant height above the ground. On the inside of the cage, Orton climbed up to meet him in battle. With a series of blows, Orton knocked Samir off the cage onto a table positioned on the ground below. Samir landed on his back, narrowly missing, striking the table with his head and neck first. Falling backwards, Samir was not able to spot the landing before impact in order to adjust his position appropriately and to optimize the landing. Had Samir struck the table with his head first, he might have been expected to have suffered a closed head injury, a skull fracture, or both. In addition, he might have also been expected to have suffered a flexion type of cervical fracture, or a cervical dislocation, or posterior disc herniation. Of course, he might have also been expected to have suffered rib fractures or fractures of his thoracic spine or upper extremities as well. Fortunately for Samir, none of these happened. He did not appear to suffer serious injury as a result of the fall. However, it appears that Orton has it out for the Singh brothers, as this next incident involves both Orton and the Singhs as well. In this next incident, the fight, as it often does, spilled outside of the ring and onto the ground below. While fighting outside of the ring, Orton grabbed Samir and casually suplexed him into the table at ringside. Unfortunately, when Orton performed this move, he did so with a little bit too much effort. He over-rotated Samir in the air, causing Samir to land on his head and neck on the table rather than on his back. Samir bounced off the back of his head onto the floor beside the table. As with the fall in the Punjabi prison match, Samir fell backwards and was not able to spot his landing before impact. He was unable to protect himself appropriately, and serious injury could easily have occurred. As with Liz Mark's botched Styles Clash, the same injuries that were possible with Liz Mark were possible here also with Samir Singh. Fortunately, however, Samir avoided serious injury and was able to continue performing with his brother in subsequent matches. Next. This last incident that I'm going to talk about today involves another Mexican luchador currently signed to the Lucha Libre AAA worldwide promotion. This particular wrestler is known for his death-defying, high-flying feats. Can you guess who it is? The incident occurred during a match in the Triplemania 25 event on June 16th, 2019. During the match, after the action once again spilled outside of the ring, Aerostar, as this wrestler is known, climbed up onto the rigging for the lights. Then, as the wrestling continued, Aerostar launched himself from a height of approximately 15 to 20 feet onto the wrestlers fighting on the concrete below. He flew towards the wrestlers in a skydiving position. Although he fell to the ground face first and he was able to see the ground coming, he misjudged the position of the wrestlers below and only partially fell on top of them. He struck the wrestlers with his lower body, causing his upper body, which was positioned over the concrete floor and not the wrestlers, to begin rotating. Aerostar struck the ground with his hands and his head first. Bam! Given the position in which he struck the ground, this collision could have resulted in a number of injuries affecting primarily the upper body. The list of injuries possible in this situation would include fractures of the upper extremities, fractures of the skull, or fractures or dislocations of the cervical spine. This injury mechanism might easily also have included a closed head injury, such as a concussion or a subdural or subarachnoid hemorrhage. And these just refer to different types of bleeding that occurs underneath the skull, but over top or underneath of the lining that covers the brain. After the fall, Aerostar was taken by stretcher to the back, leaving everyone to believe that he had suffered a serious injury. However, he was seen to be moving his hands and fingers while on the stretcher, suggesting that the likelihood that he had suffered a cervical spine injury was less likely. Later, he tweeted that the flight home after the event would be difficult, although not impossible, stating that he had not been seriously injured in the fall. To be honest, that is frankly amazing. The fact that he could fall from a height of approximately 15 to 20 feet, landing on his head and neck and not be seriously injured is both incredible and ridiculously lucky. That dude should have played the lottery after the fall, because he would have been more likely to win the lottery than he would have been to have suffered no injury after falling in that manner. Later, Aerostar posted images on Twitter of his bruises suffered from the fall and promised fans that he would improve his flight the next time around. Personally, I think that he might want to stick to taking Ubers on the ground after his failed landing during this incident. Now, let's look at my favorite comments from the previous video. If you want to be part of the team that helps with the preparation of videos or the selection of topics for videos, then you can join some of my patrons like Andreas Hufton from Norway by checking out my Patreon page. If you're looking for workouts, exercises, or information on injury prevention, be sure to check out our sister channel on YouTube, Human 2.0. Thanks for watching, and as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.
Just a flesh wound.